The glass walls of the boardroom stretched from floor to ceiling, framing the Chicago River in cold silver light. I sat at the long mahogany table with my binder open, the quarterly compliance report laid out in neat columns of red and black. 15 years of vigilance, of late nights poring over numbers no one else cared to see, reduced to charts and bullet points. The door swung open, and in walked Damian Whitlock. Armani suit pressed sharp as a blade, his gelled hair catching the fluorescent light. He carried himself as if the city were his inheritance. Son of the CEO, newly appointed Vice President of Strategy. I had barely spoken 5 words when he waved dismissively at my slides. "We don't need to drown in details," he said, that half-smile curling at the corner of his mouth. He leaned back in the leather chair as if the room and all of us in it were already his. "Quality specialists like you are lined up outside our doors. You're easily replaceable." The words landed like glass shards. But he wasn't finished. With a flick of his hand, he slid a contract across the polished table. My eyes fell on the name typed neatly at the bottom, Sabrina Cho, a junior analyst I had mentored, trained, defended when others doubted her. "She's younger," Damian said smoothly. "Cheaper. Hungrier. Consider yourself obsolete." A ripple of uneasy chuckles ran through the board. Their laughter sounded hollow against the humming air vents. My pulse thundered, but my face betrayed nothing. If Damian expected tears or protest, he would be disappointed. I closed my binder with deliberate calm, the snap of its cover sharper than the laughter. From my bag, I drew a sealed envelope, sliding it across the table. I met his eyes. "Then you'll have no trouble managing without me." Inside was my resignation letter. Beneath it, the attachment. 30 pages I had prepared quietly, methodically, for the day I knew would come. Damian barely glanced at the envelope. He flicked his wrist, dismissing me as though I were a secretary late with his coffee. "Clear your desk," he said. I stood, smoothed the lapel of my jacket, and walked out of the boardroom with my head held high. Behind me, the envelope lay unopened, its weight invisible to everyone but me. By the time I reached the elevator, I knew my next step would change everything. The marble lobby gleamed beneath the morning lights, each polished tile echoing the steps I carried across it. My arms tightened around the small cardboard box that contained what was left of my career, a photo of my parents, a fountain pen from my first supervisor, a mug with a fading company logo. Familiar faces lifted their eyes as I passed colleagues I had guided, defended, or corrected in quieter days. Their gazes darted away just as quickly, as if eye contact with me might compromise their own standing. Silence was safer than sympathy. 15 years earlier, I had entered this very lobby in different shoes, heels too cheap to walk comfortably across the marble. Back then, I was just a temp hired to file reports no one else wanted to touch. I remembered the receptionist asking me if I was sure I wanted to work here. "It's a machine that eats people," she said. I thought she was exaggerating. Yet year by year, project by project, I climbed until my name sat beside Senior Compliance Officer. I carried the scars of sleepless nights, regulatory battles, and 3 near disasters I had averted by sheer stubbornness. Now I was leaving as if none of it mattered, reputation reduced to a smirk and a dismissive gesture. Damian's words trailed me like a shadow easily replaceable. The HR office smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. A middle-aged manager with hollow eyes began to process the paperwork, reading from a script about my notice period. Then the door opened, and Damian strolled in without knocking. His cologne hit before his voice did. "2 weeks won't be necessary," he said with casual cruelty. "We'll process this today. Don't bother coming back." He tapped the envelope on the desk with 2 fingers, never bothering to look beneath the letter. The attachment, the 30-page compliance dossier, stayed pressed flat. unread, its words carrying enough weight to topple his entire empire. His impatience dismissed it as just another set of reports. By 5 o'clock, I was outside in the sharp Chicago wind, the box shifting in my arms as I unlocked my car. My hair whipped across my face, stinging my eyes. But my steps were steady. My mother's voice rose in memory. Steady as gospel hope for the best. Plan for the worst. I slid the box into the back seat and closed the door with finality, already knowing that the real storm was still ahead. The apartment greeted me with silence when I pushed the door open. I carried the box to the living room and set it down on the coffee table. The space was modest, 2 bedrooms carved into an aging Oak Park building, but it had always been mine. On the wall above the sofa hung the framed photographs of my parents, my father in his oil-stained coveralls, my mother with her apron tied too tight, both of them wearing smiles that hid exhaustion. I lowered myself onto the couch, eyes drawn to their faces, and the memories pulled me back. My father, a machinist, believed precision was a kind of moral duty. Every bolt has a purpose, he told me as I watched him adjust gears on an old lathe. If you ignore one, the whole machine fails. He spoke about machines, but he meant people too. My mother carried 2 jobs, nurse's aide by day, waitress by night, and still found time to whisper lessons before bed. Never let anyone tell you you're less than you are. Those words became the backbone I leaned on long before I knew how much I'd need it. I thought of my early years at Midwest Trust, when I was still proving myself. Nights spent hunched over contracts while janitors emptied trash cans around me. Once, I discovered a flaw in a legal filing just hours before a deadline. I stayed until 3 in the morning, rewriting entire sections. That correction saved the company from a $25 million penalty. The following month, at the shareholder meeting, Damien's father stood beneath the spotlight, accepting applause for proactive leadership. My name wasn't even in the footnotes. And then, the memory that still stung, most a scheduled trip to visit my mother in hospice, canceled because an audit had gone sideways. She'd called me from her hospital bed, her voice faint but steady, asking if I was still working. I told her I'd come next week. There wasn't a next week. I pressed my palms together and stared at the neat box on the table. A mug, a pen, a photo, trophies from years I had given away piece by piece, for what to be tossed aside with a smirk. The realization cut sharper than Damien's words. I had traded joy for loyalty to an institution that now saw me as expendable. And yet, in the stillness of that room, I felt something shift. Perhaps those very sacrifices, once ignored, could become the weapon I now carried. 1 week passed, and the weight of silence began to shift. I had spent the days settling into a rhythm that felt foreign. Late mornings, quiet meals, hours without emails or phone calls demanding answers. But just as I began to taste the edges of peace, the first tremor reached me. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The name flashing across the screen startled me. Tara Flores. Once my ally on the production floor, Tara never reached out without reason. Her message was clipped. Panicked, something's wrong. They can't explain the failed audits. Did you change anything before leaving? I sat up, tea cooling on the bedside table, and typed slowly. I left instructions. Ask Damien. Then I set the phone down and leaned back into the pillow. My pulse steadied, not out of indifference, but with a cold clarity I hadn't felt in years. At headquarters, I could imagine the scene all too well. Phones shrilling in every corner, red alerts flashing across compliance screens, engineers huddled over data that refused to reconcile. Damien would be sweating through his custom suit, voice cracking as he barked contradictory orders. He'd always confused volume with authority. The stakes rose quickly. A $12 million shipment of medical devices bound for a major hospital was frozen. Regulators demanding documentation that no one could provide. Clients who once praised Midwest Trust for reliability were calling hourly, their confidence dissolving with every unanswered question. And all the while, the envelope I had left behind sat on Damien's desk, buried under stray memos and an untouched cup of coffee. Inside, the 30-page attachment detailed the precise sequence of compliance checks that would have prevented this collapse. Step by step, written with the same precision my father once used on his machines. They could have saved themselves in an afternoon, but arrogance is blind, and Damien's eyes had skimmed past salvation. I pictured him shredding reports in desperation, ink-stained papers littering the floor, while the board demanded answers he couldn't give. My instructions lay just inches away, their value invisible until it was too late. I closed my eyes and exhaled, the faintest trace of satisfaction curling at the edges of my calm. The unraveling had only just begun, and I knew the next call would not be from Tara alone. The cafe near Union Station smelled of burnt espresso and old wood polish, a place where I had once stolen quiet minutes between endless audits. When I spotted Tara at the corner table, she looked nothing like the steady supervisor I remembered. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight around a paper cup she hadn't touched. "They're saying you sabotaged the systems before leaving," she whispered as soon as I sat down. Her eyes darted to the door, as if someone might overhear. The word struck harder than I expected. Sabotage. I stared at her, stunned. Damien's telling people that. She nodded quickly. "He circulated a report claiming you planted traps in the compliance software. The engineers are repeating it, even some you trained. People are scared. Marion, they think the collapse was deliberate." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Betrayal had always been possible, but to see it sharpened into an official story. My name twisted into a weapon it burned. I had built that department brick by brick, mentored analysts who now looked at me as if I were the enemy. Rage welled up hot, but I swallowed it, lowering my voice until it was steady. "Let them think what they want," I said finally. "The truth has a way of surfacing." Tara's hand trembled as she reached for mine. "I just thought you should know." That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights low and my laptop open. There was only one person I trusted with what I had hidden for years. I dialed my cousin, Naomi Alvarez, an attorney who had made her career in intellectual property. When she answered, I told her everything: how I had been quietly developing a system of protocols I called the Compliance Assurance Framework, refining it in my own time, documenting processes far beyond my job description. It was the architecture Midwest now depended on, though no one at the firm understood its full depth. Naomi listened carefully, then asked one question: "Did they ever have you sign an intellectual property agreement?" "No. My contract never changed, not even when my title did." There was a pause. Then the certainty in her voice steadied me. "Then the framework is yours, Marion. Legally and rightfully yours." I closed my eyes and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, anger shifted into something colder, sharper, a power I had never allowed myself to claim. Naomi's office sat high above LaSalle Street, the kind of room where every book spine gleamed under recessed lighting. Shelves of leather-bound volumes lined the walls, and the scent of polished oak made me feel as though I had stepped into a courtroom before the trial began. She gestured toward the conference table, and I set down my stack of binders, folders, and loose drafts. Years of work, pages smudged with notes, diagrams, and late-night revisions spilled across the surface. "These aren't just processes," I said quietly. arranging the flow charts and risk matrices into neat rows. This is how I kept them out of federal investigations. Naomi adjusted her glasses and leaned over the papers. Her eyes moved quickly. Then she sat back with a grin. This isn't just process. Marion, this is patentable. Her words made my chest tighten. Patentable. Not a side project. Not invisible labor intellectual property that bore my name. Together, we began drafting applications, each sequence and algorithm carved into provisional claims. For hours, we typed, cross-referenced, and annotated until my hand cramped. Fear flickered. What if Midwest fought back? What if they destroyed me? Yet exhilaration surged stronger. For the first time, I was not the employee guarding the company. I was the architect guarding my own creation. As we filed the documents, a strange calm settled over me. My framework now had a legal backbone, something no sneer or rumor could erase. Naomi placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. They underestimated you. That will cost them. Meanwhile, across the loop, Damien prowled through headquarters like a cornered animal. I pictured him in the compliance wing, face flushed, tie crooked. Staff whispered about client calls gone unanswered, about regulators circling like vultures. Lawsuits loomed, contracts froze. I imagined the conference room filled with engineers heaping blame on suppliers, suppliers snapping back at production pointing fingers at quality control, and Damien always louder than everyone else shouting at them all, too blind to see the solution sat under his own desk, unopened. They had called me replaceable. Now they couldn't even function without the map still locked inside my head. I walked out of Naomi's office with the city roaring below. Patents filed, a storm gathering, and the undeniable knowledge that my turn had finally come. The knock came just after dusk. I opened the door to find Alan Whitlock standing in the hallway, shoulders sagging beneath his tailored suit. His tie was askew, his eyes rimmed red as if he hadn't slept in days. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. The polished CEO now reduced to a man running out of options. Marion, he said, voice heavy. Come back. Triple your salary. Director title. Full authority over Damien. I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. His desperation might have moved me once, but the offer came too late. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm before I answered. No, I said evenly. His head dropped slightly, but before he could protest, I added, one concession, a single consulting day, at my rate, on my terms. Relief and dread flickered together across his face, but he nodded. Tomorrow, then. The following morning, I stood before the mirror fastening the last button of my navy blazer. My hair was swept into a sleek knot, makeup applied with careful precision. No trace remained of the woman who had walked out with a cardboard box. When I stepped into headquarters, the hum of voices faltered. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes widened. I walked with measured steps through the lobby, heels striking the marble with authority. In the compliance wing, Damien's jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a tooth. He opened his mouth, but Alan's presence at my side silenced him. I turned to the cluster of engineers, their faces drawn with exhaustion and panic. Gather your reports, I told them. We'll start with the fundamentals for the next 8 hours. I guided them through the maze they had been stumbling blind through. I corrected missteps, rewrote parameters, and explained sequences I had once shared in fragments but never fully revealed. Slowly, comprehension replaced confusion. Relief softened tense shoulders, and the first clean results appeared on their screens. By evening, one frozen hospital contract was cleared for shipment. Clients, who had arrived to witness the chaos firsthand, saw with their own eyes that progress only came when I commanded the room. I collected my bag as the engineers cheered faintly, exhaustion breaking into tentative smiles. Damien stood in the corner, powerless, while I walked past him without a glance, already thinking of what the board would face next. The chandeliers of the Palmer House Hilton glowed like molten gold above the long conference table. Velvet drapes muffled the noise of Michigan Avenue outside, a stark contrast to the worn rug in my Oak Park living room. I walked in with my folder tucked under my arm, every step measured. The board members looked up, faces lined with sleepless nights and fear disguised as formality. Alan was already seated, his expression taut. Damien sat further down, tapping a pen against his notepad, though his eyes never rose to meet mine. I placed the folder on the table and opened it. I won't return as an employee, I began. Instead, I'm offering a license to use my compliance framework. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. I pushed a single sheet forward. Terms are simple. 20% of annual compliance savings, renewable every 5 years at my discretion. A gasp broke the silence. Alan leaned forward, voice strained. That percentage is impossible. We can negotiate something more reasonable. I closed the folder with deliberate calm and slid it back into my bag. Then rebuild your protocols from scratch. I wish you luck convincing regulators to wait while you do. The room fractured into whispers, board members hissing urgent arguments to one another. They knew the truth without my system. Their shipments would remain frozen, their clients would walk, and lawsuits would swallow them whole. After several tense minutes, Alan cleared his throat. We accept your terms. I nodded once, sealing the moment in silence. Then came the final twist, delivered almost sheepishly by a board secretary. Damien would be reassigned to oversee the administration of my licensing payments. His pen stopped tapping. The color drained from his face as realization sank in. I rose from the table, adjusted my blazer, and walked out beneath the chandeliers, the echoes of my heels marking the rhythm of their defeat. The empire that had dismissed me now lived on my terms, and the man who once called me replaceable would spend his days calculating the proof of my worth. The skyline of Manhattan glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office. From here, Central Park stretched out like a living canvas, the trees shifting with the seasons. Months had passed since I left Chicago behind, and now the brass plate on my door read, Director of Risk and Compliance, Avalon Risk Solutions. My name carried weight here. My team greeted me with respect, born not from obligation but from recognition of what I had built. Every day, I worked with the precision my father taught me and the dignity my mother demanded. My patents hung in frames on the office wall, each one stamped with my name, no longer hidden in the shadows of someone else's speech. For the first time, the work I had sacrificed for carried my signature, and every quarter, an envelope arrived from the Midwest Trust offices, the checks signed under the watch of Damien Whitlock. Payments for the very framework he once dismissed, now converted into undeniable proof of my worth. I opened each one slowly, the inked signature a quiet reminder that arrogance has a price. The moment of true symmetry came at an industry gala in Manhattan. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and as I moved through the crowd of executives and analysts, I saw him, Damien, shoulders hunched, eyes scanning the floor. He approached awkwardly, a folder of documents clutched in his hand. Ms. Cross, he said, voice low, as though speaking my name cost him something. He extended the papers without meeting my gaze. I smiled, steady and unshaken. Remember when you said I was easily replaceable? Tell me, how's the search going? His eyes flickered, then fell to the carpet. For once, he had no words. The silence between us carried the weight of every check he would continue to process in my name. I turned away, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses swelling around me. Revenge, I realized, was never about destroying Midwest trust. It was about building a life where my value could never again be questioned. The sharpest justice is when those who belittled you are forced to honor your name, again and again, while you rise higher beyond their reach.